Welcome to All Things Greater Burlington, where you will hear from the movers, shakers, and changemakers that are moving Greater Burlington forward. Here is your host, Stephen Brody.
Welcome to All Things Greater Burlington. If you have been a resident, a business owner, a tourist, you name it, and have been in the Burlington area, you know the sound of my next guest. He has been a fixture in Burlington for years. He is on KBUR radio every morning and has been a real good friend to the Greater Burlington Partnership as well, allowing us to come on and share what's going on in the community and the area and what we need to know. So it is a real pleasure to have with us today Steve Hexom. And Steve, again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and being on the other side of the microphone this time.
Well, I've been on this mic or behind a microphone for decades. In fact, this year and this fall will be 50 years in broadcasting.
No kidding.
Coming up in February, it will be 46 years working in Burlington. Wow. And yes, it does. You blink your eyes and a decade goes by.
Yeah.
But I think, so he said, I had a desire when I started here. Well, I came here in February of 1977, and I thought, okay, and I was asked, I think, about a week in by the guy I'd been working with. He said, so how long do you want to stick around here? I said, I'd like to at least a year, but no more than 2, because I don't want to get the reputation of being, jumping around, so to speak. And every time it came time to reach a decision or a changing point, I got promoted. Yeah. I got kicked upstairs. Got the program directorship at KGRS. Within 2 years, and then John Weir was going to retire. John was he was in charge of most of the stations, and then Dave Steinley was the president. He said, I think you can handle both. I think you can handle both these stations. Why not I'll just appoint you to be the overall head of both. And so I said, okay. And I'm starting to get the feeling like, okay, you start feeling a little bit like, I thought, well, wow, this is like every so often I don't have to work very long or very hard, and I suddenly I'm moving up the scale, and I said, this is great. What I realized very soon thereafter is that being kicked up the scale, as the old adage is, the higher you climb the flagpole, the more your rear end is showing. I think the probably the better way to put it would be, I didn't think about the inherent jealousy that we had a fairly large staff. The inherent jealousy. Why is he keeps? What's he got that I don't have? Why is he getting all these perks, so to speak? Yeah. No, it was an eye opener, and it did sort of bring me back down to reality, and it was a good thing. Yeah. But radio has changed so dramatically over all these decades. Yeah. We had. I can remember I was at Luther College doing radio in there. In fact, my very first major, contribution was covering, believe it or not, the 1972 election. And I was the local analyst because I was from Decorah, where Luther College is located. So I was we were doing this in tandem with the commercial stations. So I was on the commercial station and also on KWLC.
Is that the first year that Iowa had their caucus?
No, it was 19. Well, actually, they did have a caucus that year. But nobody paid any attention to it. Okay. The only one that the one that stood out was 1976, and that was the year that Jimmy Carter had pointed out that Iowa had a presidential preference, or would be a potential starting point for his campaign. And I remember having our news director in 1974. He went to the mid-year convention of the Democratic Party, and he said, and he showed me a picture. He showed me a picture of Jimmy Carter. He said, this guy's a rising star. Keep your eye on this guy.
Yeah.
And anyway, that was 1976. 1972 was the year of the election that took place, the year of Watergate.
Yes.
And, I think I've talked many times about the fact that, so how does Richard Nixon get viewed in terms of history? Mm-hmm. And I said the same thing about Richard Nixon that I said about Bill Clinton, and I said about anybody else who's in politics who gets in trouble. It's never the deed that puts you in impeachment territory. Mm-hmm. It's the lying about it or the obstruction of justice or trying to cover it up.
Sure.
If Nixon would have just simply, all he had to do was simply say, on the 18th, it happened on June 17th, 1972. On the 18th, he said, I have fired Clark McGregor. I have fired the entire campaign or the entire re-election committee.
Yeah.
We are cleaning house. I take full responsibility.
Yeah.
And I apologize sincerely to the American people, and we will not tolerate that in my administration anymore. So it's a fresh start and a new day for the campaign to re-elect.
That would have made a difference.
Would have made a huge difference. He would have been regarded as one of the best presidents we've ever had, perhaps.
Yeah. And same thing, like you said, with Bill Clinton. If Bill Clinton had come out and said,
I did have improper relations with that woman, Ms. Lewinsky.
Right. Now, has broadcasting always been an interest of yours, or did you fall into it?
Well, I think what happened was I'd had an interest in doing it. I was in 8th grade. I got a tape recorder for Christmas, and I kind of did my own radio show at a stereo and I would do my own radio show, and I can't even remember what the call letters were, but it would be like I would pretend that I was on the radio, and I found a fascination with it. I didn't think too much about it. Until I went to college, and then I had a friend of mine. He was in our fraternity. I pledged for a fraternity. He was in the fraternity, and he'd been working at the radio station for a couple of years. He says, you really ought to. We were talking one. He said, you really ought to come by and see if and see if you'd like to do some radio. And I said, you know what? Why not? And I went there, and I still remember the very first time I went in through the door, and I met the program director. Uh-huh. And I said, I had been advised by Doug. Doug Huffaker was the name. I said, Doug said, come and see you and see if you have any interest or if there's anything I can do for the radio station. Yeah. He said, well, I tell you what, I'm going to hand you some news. This is some news copy. I just want to have you do like a 5-minute newscast for me. I'll just record you, and we'll see what happens. Yeah. And I went into the booth, and I, fresh and cold, took the copy and started reading. He said, can you start work tomorrow?
Wow.
I have an even better story than that, and that is I did work at the radio station. I was working there through college. It was my work steady, so to speak. That was how I earned money to pay for college and also to have extra money. Yeah. But I can still remember it was I'd been working during the summers in a grocery store. I did that in 72. In 1973, I worked as a dispatcher for the Decorah Police Department, and I actually wore a police uniform, and I was the one who was at the counter when anybody came in to have something to talk about with the police. Uh-huh. And I thought, okay, this is fun. I was trying to come up with other things to do because you can't, I figured I'm not. The radio station ran, but it was pretty thin staffed in the summertime. Anyway, so 1974, I'd been working in a grocery store, cutting meat and doing everything that they do, and the big supermarket across the street. I said they were looking for somebody to work in their meat department, and I said, well, gee, I did that for 4 years all through high school. Why don't I'll just stroll on over there? And they said, well, yes, we'll be glad to hire you. And I still remember the very first week I walked in the place, and I said, well, I'm here. They said, okay, well, here's what we're going to have you do today, the very first day. You see that stack of bloody meat trays over there? They really need to be cleaned and scoured out. And I said, and they really need extremely hot water and soap to be able to do it. And I spent the entire day cleaning bloody meat trays. And I was so, my hands were wrinkled, and the next day I said, okay, what do you want? Well, you've cut up chickens before, haven't you? I said, well, of course. I said, we've got about 200 chickens we need to have you cut up. And I spent the day cutting up chickens and quartering chickens all day.
Boy, did they find the right person for this job.
Boy. And then the next day I went in and I said, okay, I was already feeling kind of bummed out. My next day I went in, they said, I think we're going to have you work in cold cuts and slice luncheon meat. Thousands of slices of luncheon meat. Anyway, long story short, I went home to my mother and I said, Mom, I don't think I can do this. I really don't. And then it wasn't more than maybe 10 minutes after that, the phone rang. And she said, Steve, it's for you. And I remember picking up the phone.
What do you want me to cut now?
I said, no, it was Bob Larson who was in charge of the overall. He was in charge. He was a student, or the teacher that was in charge of the entire radio station, and the manager. And he said, Steve, I understand you have a summer job. Is that right? I said, well, yes, I do. He said, is there any way you could get out of that job? I need a manager to run the radio station this summer. Would that be a possibility? Is there any possibility you could do that? I said, Bob, consider it done.
Yeah, thank you.
And I've told the story many times. And I remember going in and I told I quit the meat cutting job the very next day. And I remember I said, when I did that, I said, that was the last day that I've ever worked in my life.
Yeah, because you don't consider this work.
No, this is just fun.
Yeah.
Now, there's certain parts of the job, as you know, responsibilities, there's some administration, but mostly it's just fun.
It has to be. For you to have such longevity in the business, you have to have fun, because if it becomes a labor and a chore, it's not going to be as enjoyable.
And I've said something to my daughters as I raised 3 grown daughters. I said, if you're not having fun, do something else.
Right.
And and I've said, I've also told them a couple of things. I said, if you love what you do, you'll always have enough money. Mm-hmm. If you don't love what you do, you'll never have enough money.
You'll always be looking for more.
because no matter how much money you make, and if you're unhappy, it won't make any difference. It won't count it. Yeah.
There's a fascinating story, like with myself. You reminded me of it when I was back in California and I wanted to get on this college radio station. They had a public affairs slot that they could get people on, and I said, "How do we get on?" And they said, well, send us a demo tape. So my friend and I, we sat down one day at his apartment. We put a tape recorder in front of us, and we just hit record, and we just started talking as if we were doing a program. And we turned it into the program manager, and the program manager said, this is really good. How many takes did it take you to do that? We said, that was our first take. That was it. And they went, no problem. We would love to have you on. It was just one of those things where we just felt so comfortable about doing that and discussing, and so we ended up.
And you had fun. And you had fun
we
doing
had fun.
Yeah.
And we had a good rapport back and forth with each other. And so we ended up doing that for a couple of years, and it was such a joy. So I can relate a lot to what you're talking about.
And I think the other thing is technology has changed. It has changed the industry so so thoroughly.
Yeah.
The number of people that we had working for us to do 2 stations, we have a quarter of that number to run 6 stations.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
It's because of technology. We have, and I remember when I was on the Steamboat Days board, when Steamboat Days was a huge event around here back in the 80s. And I was recording all of the commercials for all of the radio stations throughout all of eastern Iowa.
Yeah.
And I was part of my job. And I can remember I needed to do 3 60-second spots that would be the generals. These would be, one would be a country music related one. One would be the rock music related one. One would be one that would be able to be a little bit of mix of both. It would be for all general stations.
Yeah.
And I can remember going in at 2:00 in the afternoon, and I would have to be. It would take me until 10:00 that night to record 3, because what I did is, to do them right, I was using high speed, high graphic tape, and but I had to cut. I had to literally cut and splice, 40 to 50 cuts into every one of those, just so they would match up.
Wow.
And it took, and now in the same with the digital editing.
Yeah.
It's a matter of I could have done those things it would have taken me some time, but I could have done it in less than half an hour now.
In over the years, have you ever had an engineer do the stuff for you, or did you always have to do everything yourself? When I was doing the talk show back in the early days, or back in the 80s and 90s, I had an engineer. That engineer would be answering the phones, telling me who's on the line. Yep.
We would be communicating back and forth. I was in a glass studio, and he was in another glass studio.
Yep.
And I had so all in continual communication.
Yeah.
We did digital delay, so we could actually, when somebody said something naughty, we could get rid of them.
Right. That's right.
And now it's pretty much on the fly. The secret here is that, yes, could we do a delay? We could, but it's also problematic, because then it would be, you really need somebody to be an engineer if you're going to be doing that.
Yeah.
And there's just not enough people to do that.
Was that much of an adjustment, Steve, to learn to do everything yourself and not have an engineer do that function?
No, it really wasn't, because most of the time I did. The talk show was the only time that I had to really, I needed an engineer.
Okay.
Otherwise, everything else was done. Everything else, you queued the records up. You had to figure out which song was going to be coming up next. I can remember, I think the thing about radio, and anybody who's ever been in radio when it was back in the vinyl days, and you had so many records you had over here, and you had so many over here, and and you're trying, and you have a format, and you're trying to figure out, okay, let's see, I want this, okay, and you're thinking all the time about what's coming, and it seems that a 3.5 minute song goes by in about 15 seconds.
You have to be ready.
Because you always have to have the next thing ready to go. And you're also thinking about what are you going to say between those songs.
Yeah.
And basics are still basics. And, it's, and having, you're on you put a turntable record on a turntable and it skips.
Oh, sure.
And then there's the old cue burn. Oh, okay. I got to go in farther than this one, because, or I can't do it. The technology. I remember I also started a sound and light show business and sound reinforcement business, and had broadcast equipment. I had broadcast equipment, and I think we spent $15,000 to $18,000 just doing, and we had lights. We had a starburst that we would have in the back of us, and but it had spotlights that we strung all the way around. We did Memorial Auditorium, so we could create, in essence, a disco or a sort of a spectacular sound. And then we also hooked into the sound system for the whole auditorium. But it would take all day. It would take all day to do that. And then when you did the show, you had to always be, you were the entertainer, and you had to always be on top of that. That business, it was now. And now your one laptop plugging into an amplifier and a couple of speakers and maybe some lights, you can all do it with a tiny fraction of the cost of doing that, and not have to worry about record skipping or trying to find what happens if something doesn't go right or what.
When things converted from vinyl to the CDs and then everything then went computerized, how did you see that in terms of the industry? Did you see that, yes, this is a good thing, this makes our job easier, this is just the natural progression?
I think actually I really did think that it was something that was fantastic. In fact, I remember going down to, this is in the 90s, very first time I took the family down to Disney World. And I went for the ABC radio convention, and they had a number of things there. And I was down there specifically looking for a digital. I was looking for a digital service, whether it would be Audio Vault or Profit System, something that would play, that we could simply program in all of the music, all of the pieces, all the commercials. You load them in, and then the system will, and you can I remember digital reel-to-reel. We could actually record on the fly, and I could set it up that it could be automatic. Then we also had the ability, even back then when we first did it, I could log in from home. And I could change things. That was that was a little bit later on. That was after. Well, I had to have a computer at home first that would do that. But when we did, I could actually, and it was a little primitive, but I could go in and I do that now. I can sit on my couch right now and do almost anything that I would do on a radio station.
Yeah.
And I do. I take a laptop with me when we go on vacation. Mm-hmm. I've fixed things in California and Florida, wherever I am. A lot of times in Chicago. But
I need to ask a behind-the-scenes question. It's always fascinated me. How do you, or any one for that matter, when they do a morning show, how do you get the news content that you then share? Is there some sort of a wire service? Is there something that you are receiving that you then are able that's what you're reading off of?
There are many different sources. You have the AP, Associated Press. Yeah. That's a start. Radio Iowa, they have an audio service and a print service. Mm-hmm. You also have anything on the internet. Everything and anything on the internet. So anything that is out there, that's and you have every other newspaper, every other printing, or any other electronic programming service. So it's all available. There's so many things that are available. Now the question is distilling it down so that it has to be something. It has to be good. It has to be something that sounds that hits people where they live in Burlington.
Yeah.
Or where they live in Fort Madison or wherever. But if you probably the best way to put it is real simple. It's concentric circles.
Okay.
You start with one very small circle right around Burlington. That's your number one source. Yeah. Then you draw a larger concentric circle around that, and you can expand beyond that. But what is most important is what's most important right here, mm-hmm. and that's how it is. And if it's a national story that has an impact on Burlington, then it becomes a bigger story.
Yeah. So when you come in the morning, I would imagine you have to give yourself X amount of prep time.
Yes. And a lot of that, I have a news. I don't have to do. I'm not going through. I'm looking for stories. I'm usually looking for fun stories. So I'm looking for kickers. I'm looking for things that the other side of the news.
You're really good at that in listening in the mornings and trying to engage Colin Letty in that. Yes.
And I think that the other part is and they have. That I want to get as many of these things, these pieces of the farm news, the sports news, the weather news, all of those. I do the weather for all 6 radio stations. I do the sports for all 6 radio stations. I can program any of them to do whatever needs to be done. I can fix any of them probably, well, to some degree. I am in charge basically of 2 all the time that I have to program. That's Fox Sports and KBUR.
Okay.
But I think the reality is the more you can do ahead of time, the more you're free to the more you're free to just simply be able to concentrate on just, having fun.
Yeah. You have covered so much, Steve, over the years. Is there anything out there that you haven't that you'd like to still?
I don't know if there's anything. That's sort of like asking a question. I think I've done about everything in Burlington you can do, and I've had opportunities to go out of here and to do other things.
Yeah.
Would I like to try something we're talking about podcasting. I'm looking at, so what am I going to do? What am I going to do when I'm no longer doing the radio show? What will I do? I think I've talked about audio books. I've talked about doing, because I was in the theater. I was in a player's workshop for 40 years. Probably did 50 different plays.
Wow.
And that's really how most of my base of friends were all in the Players Workshop. And doing a show, I'd be doing a show all the time. This is in the time before I was doing the early morning show.
Okay.
Early mornings became early mornings 15 years ago when the early morning voice of KBUR, that was Rod Carey, he had health issues and had an enlarged heart, and he was told that he needed to be taking it easy. And so I can remember, I guess we have to make a change here. And I made the change that got me up early, and then a little bit earlier, and you find that that it really. Yeah, it does change. It changes what you can do at night.
Sure.
It changes what you can do at night.
What time do you get in the mornings?
I'm here by 3:30 in the morning.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
So what time do you go to bed?
Usually about 8.
Sure.
Yeah, lights out at about 8.
3:30 to then start, remind me again, you start at 6 or do you start earlier than 6?
Actually,
on the air.
Well, actually, I'm doing segments on the air that are airing the weather segments and other segments that are airing on all the stations, depending upon where it is. I'm doing the weather for all the stations and updating that continually. Doing the farm news, doing the sports news, pulling all the other side stories out, getting everything ready to go. I lay it all out on the table next to me. I have a pile of each thing that I need to do. It's it does. Would I need to necessarily be there that early? Probably not necessarily, but our system has there's a quirk in the system. Everything gets updated at 3:45. That is when the system goes through a complete reset. What it means is that anything that you're doing might take 15 to 20 minutes to copy over so that it can be played on your station or any other station.
Yeah.
And I like to have, if you beat that time, if you're there before that, then you'll always make sure that the weathers are the current weather and all of the things that you're doing are on time. But it's an early morning kind of thing, but you also have the option to get out early too.
Certainly. And then we're just about out of time. When just out of curiosity, when you're done, what do you like to do then for the rest of the day?
Well, I think I have over the years, I've typically gone home, and I might mow the lawn or work on the yard. I might take care of something. I might pay bills. Typically, I'll get out on my bike and do a bike ride. I'll do that today. If it's extreme, if it's raining, no. I don't ride a bike in the rain. The only time I ride a bike in the rain is if I have to and I'm on Ragbri.
Yeah.
And somebody said to me, back last month, "Are you sure are you really not doing Ragbri?" I said, "Look, in 2019, after I wrapped it up in 2019, after I did Ragbri in 2019, I said, wow, that was every day on Ragbri for 40 years." And Shane McCampbell made it my day. The day in Burlington was Steve Hexom Day. Oh. And I thought, and I said, well, it doesn't get any sweeter than this. The next year, obviously, was the pandemic. And once you lose a year, and then I did came back for 3 days in 21. And then this year it was all across the extreme north, and my wife would have had to drive me 800 miles just to do 3 days. Yeah. I stopped camping in 1990. That's right. I mean, 1990, the last time I pitched a tent in my life. So Ragbri, if I were to say what have been the most important things that I've done in this community, that I found the most satisfying, Players Workshop would probably be up there on the very top. Steamboat Days would be right behind that. Riding my bike and Ragbri would certainly be right in the same category. Yeah. And I've had a chance to do that. But the other thing is I've had a chance to raise 3 daughters. And my baby daughter got married last year, and I've got 3 lovely daughters, and I've got a lovely wife, and that kind of, it really does anchor you and in terms of keeping you in the town. That's really what's anchored me to this town.
Sure. Well, I can't believe how quickly the time went by today, and it's just, I wish we had so much more time to share, but it's been a real pleasure to have you with us and to get a glimpse into you and your years, your longevity. And, we talk about our show as All Things Greater Burlington. I mean, that could be you, Steve. You have done all things Greater Burlington for decades, and so we're better off for that, and we appreciate you.
Thank you very much. It's been fun. Yeah, it's been fun.
Well, thank you very much for listening to All Things Greater Burlington. We invite you to like and subscribe and tell your friends about it, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
You have been listening to All Things Greater Burlington with Stephen Brody. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to catch all new episodes. To learn more about all things Greater Burlington, visit greaterburlington.com/ATGB.